You're in the right place. Advancements on Basic Income in Canada 2023 and beyond. So we will get going here. So I'd like to begin today's webinar with an acknowledgement. No matter where you're calling in from today, I want us all to recognize that we are gathering on Indigenous land, and we're grateful that we can be together. We thank Indigenous people who cared for and are still caring for this land. As settlers, it is our job to commit to learning the history, the promise, and the challenges of the TRC. I'm calling in today from Treaty 1 territory, and I live in what is colonially named Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. This is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene, and the Métis. I learned that the Stone Fort Treaty was signed on August 3rd, 1871 at Lower Fort Garry, an hour north of what is now known as Winnipeg. I'd like everyone to just take a moment and silently acknowledge the land where you are situated today and or think about a personal reflection on your commitment to the truth and reconciliation in Canada. So just take a moment. You don't have to write anything in the chat. Great, thank you. We also want to acknowledge those in this generation or in generations past who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands because of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. This acknowledgement is part of our commitment to contributing to dismantling systemic anti-Black racism. So I didn't introduce myself. My name is Maureen Owens, and I am with Communities Ending Poverty of the Tamarack Institute. Welcome to the webinar today. Our format consists of a fireside chat on the developments in basic income in Canada. We'll be sharing new research, collaborations. We'll be talking about the bill in the Senate and House of Commons on a framework for a guaranteed livable basic income. We'll also hear information on the Basic Income Guarantee Forum, which is coming to Ottawa in May, and it's very exciting. So we'll give you some information on that. We'll have a little bit of time at the end of the moderator and panelist interview for some question and answers. And then we'll regroup for a little bit of a closing and end the webinar. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today the moderator for today's chat, Tom Cooper. Tom is the director of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction. We also have a wide range of experts on our panel today, and I'm pleased to introduce you to Jessie Golem. Jessie is an entrepreneur, professional writer, photographer, pianist, and activist. Jessie produced a photo series called Humans of Basic Income and was a recipient of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project, which was cancelled in Ontario. Evelyn Forget is a professor in economics and community health science at the University of Manitoba. Jay-Z is a professor in the Department of Psychology and the Institute for Resources, Environment and Sustainability from the University of British Columbia. Tracy Smith-Carrier is an associate professor and the Canada Research Chair in advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals in the School of Humanitarian Studies from the University of Victoria. And Sheila Regehr, founding member of the Basic Income Canada Network and former executive director of the National Council of Welfare. So welcome today to all of you. Welcome participants who are on the call. I know you're in for a thought-provoking hour under the guidance of Tom Cooper. And Tom, I will turn over things to you now.
Thank you so much, Maureen, and no pressure, right? It's great to see so many attendees today, and we will get right into the discussion because we only have an hour, and I'm sure there's lots of questions and we have lots to discuss. So Sheila, I'm going to ask you the first question, and for those audience members who are new to the idea, Can you take us through Basic Income 101? What is basic income? What does the policy hope to achieve? We often hear about basic income or guaranteed livable income, UBI, and they're often interchanged. Are we talking about the same thing?
Thanks, Tom. And it's a great place to start, but difficult to do quickly. So this feels like speed dating. I'm going to go fast. So basic income essentially is a no strings income transfer from government to individuals in order to meet basic needs and live with dignity, and all parts of that matter. So you mentioned goals. The policy goals for this really are to increase income security, reduce inequality and poverty, and then I think it's more important. I know lots of people have questions about the what and how it works. We need to talk about the why first. Like, why do we need this? And that's because our economy is brutal. People are anxious and desperate. Our current systems are full of holes. We're seeing this more and more. And quite critically, I think there are old programs often based on notions of deservedness, and those are destructive and costly. Why else? Because we know a basic income works better. We just do. So what income security then does is enable everyone to boost their own capacity. And so in addition to what we can measure in income security and poverty, we see things like better health, better education, more work options that didn't exist before for people, greater public trust, a whole range of benefits. And to the question about names, yeah, we have a kind of alphabet soup sometimes, and they don't all mean the same thing. So you need to ask a few more questions. There is a convergence, however, in Canada about what a guarantee model looks like that's going to work here. So it is not all over the map, as some people seem to suggest. And the reason for that is because we already know how to do this, and we've been delivering similar successful programs for families with children under 18 and for seniors. The name thing I love because it's become a bit crazy. Old age security and the guaranteed income supplement are amazing in doing exactly what their names say they're supposed to do. They provide security and a guarantee of income when it's needed. But that's only once you reach 65. So for the rest, there are a bunch of different proposals out there. I know that people have questions about numbers and all of that sort of thing. The ICN, my organization, proposes an option that basically looks at an amount that prevents poverty. I won't even give you the number. And it shows how to pay for it fairly. There are other proposals out there that do different things. For us, gradually reducing the benefit is important because it makes sure that your paid employment pays off. Child benefits remain in place in almost all of these proposals. So we are talking about adults, the children are covered. So I'm not going to give any more details. I encourage everybody to read. I think we've got somebody who can put things in the chat. BICN's policy options document, especially option 1, is a good place to start. Chapter 9 in Evelyn's book that I think we're going to get information on as well, they explain both the why and the how. Also important to note, basic income doesn't do everything. It's not supposed to. It works in synergy with other services and supports, especially for things that go beyond the basics. Back to the alphabet. L is for livable, and that stresses the importance of adequacy. We know that social assistance and even EI benefits for people can be thousands of dollars beyond, any sense of reasonable living standard. The U is the most interesting one. Sometimes it stands for universal, and sometimes universal means a demogrant program, which is where everybody gets the same check regardless of your income. In Canada, it's the G that's most important. The guarantee is what is universal. So it's there when you need it, and your other income does indeed matter, and that makes sure that people who need it most get the most. U also stands for unconditional, and that's really, really important. That's the defining criteria of a basic income. And back to my initial thing, this is the key to rights, agency, and dignity. Everyone is deserving in a basic income plan.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila. That's an amazing overview, very helpful. And for our audience members, there will be a test at the end of the webinar. So I hope you're paying attention. I'm just kidding, of course. I'm going to go to Jessie next. And Jessie, it's been 5 years since the Ontario Basic Income pilot ended. And you, of course, were one of the former pilot participants, and you received a basic income for about a year. What are the lasting impressions of that project? And can you tell me a little bit about your experience as a pilot participant?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And thank you everybody for being here. It's really good to see you all. Yeah, like the impressions, I think that the biggest one that I've seen is that a lot of people feel like it should not have been canceled. That's the overarching sort of opinion that I have seen since the cancellation, that it should not have been canceled, that it was too soon, and that not enough time had happened. For me personally, being on the pilot, like before I was on the pilot, I was basically the definition of the starving artist or the gig worker, or living in that sort of temporary economy that I know a lot of people, especially in my generation and following generations, are currently living under. So I had several jobs I was cobbling together to be able to try and start a business. I just simply did not have the time or the funding to start. I was also recovering from a financially abusive relationship that had tanked my savings and my credit. So I was trying to recover from that as well. And so it was very, very hard. But then having that basic income enabled me to be able to drop down, to not have to juggle several jobs at once, and to be able to focus on building my business. And I was actually seeing the business I was wanting to build grow in a very good way. And had the pilot continued, I actually would not have been able to stay on the pilot for the full 3 years that the pilot was supposed to run, because at that point I would have been making too much money off of my business. I would no longer have been eligible for the pilot. The cancellation for me was devastating and also borderline traumatizing, to see like that I was forced to put that business idea on the shelf and not be able to take it off and work on it again. And even now, as I'm trying to start this business, I'm still having to juggle jobs and just try and get this thing going. And it's proving to be impossible. And it's heartbreaking for me. And the people that I met while I was doing my portrait series, I went all over Ontario to take photos and hear the stories of the other people who were on the basic income pilot and what they were using basic income for. And the answers that I got were that people were using it to go to school so they could have a better education and further their career. Parents that were investing in time with their children and opportunities for their children. People who were being able to buy better food, to not have to go to the food bank. People who were moving into safer and more secure housing. Nobody was using basic income to sit around playing video games all day or be lazy. It was more of a motivator to work, and a motivator to do better and better their lives. It was seen as an opportunity and an investment, not a handout. So the cancellation was devastating for a lot of people. I know a few people who were able to be able to finish their schooling or be able to start a new career and everything, but a lot of people ended up having to go back into poverty. And that was also particularly devastating and traumatizing for me to see. In some people, I almost saw a physical transformation of people who were able to get themselves out of poverty and feel better and eat healthier, and then having to go back into it and see that physical transformation of slipping back into poverty again. It was heartbreaking to see. And it's something that still haunts me to this day and is a huge motivating factor for why I'm here and why I continue to advocate for this cause.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and certainly yourself and the other 4,000 basic income pilot participants who were courageous pioneers in this space really showed us just how vital it was and we'll continue certainly to follow their stories. Evelyn, I'd like to go to you next. And you recently participated in the Senate of Canada's hearings on a guaranteed livable income. What did the senators tell you, and what were some of the things they wanted to know?
Thanks, Tom. Jay-Z and I were both at the Senate speaking a little bit about, actually we spent most of our time dealing with myth busting, dealing with some of the concerns that keep coming back to haunt us. And two of them we're very familiar with, I think, in this space. First, that a basic income would discourage work. And secondly, that it would be very, very expensive. And some of you might have seen an article in the National Post this morning that repeated that second argument at some length. So I talked a little bit about the work disincentive issue. It turns out there's quite a lot of evidence out there, and it's now accepted by most economists, even economists who are very critical of the idea of basic income, that it simply doesn't discourage work. It's just not an issue. We spent quite a lot of time talking about cost in various ways. What is a basic income cost? And there's one number that floats around out there and keeps getting repeated over and over again. The claim that the parliamentary budget officer said it would cost $90 billion to deliver a basic income. $90 billion is an almost unimaginable amount of money. But fortunately for me, the parliamentary budget officer actually met with the senators before we did, and he spent a lot of time dispelling that myth. That wasn't actually what his report said. The $90 billion comes about, if you think about the number of people who might receive a basic income and you multiply that by the amount of money they might receive, you get a very large number. But if you think a little bit about how our complicated system works, that's not really the cost, because as people's incomes increase, they pay more money in income tax and they qualify for fewer other supports out there. So if they were previously receiving the GST checks that come out once a quarter or once a month from the government, for example, they might no longer qualify. And so all of that can go to fund a basic income. But the other thing we can think about is that a lot of programs at both the federal and the provincial level that are intended just to get money into the hands of people who don't have it. And again, the GST checks are a really good example. If people are receiving a basic income, they don't need to receive GST checks. So the entire cost of that program can go to pay for a basic income. And if you think about all of those programs at the federal level, suddenly the cost falls from $90 billion to $40 billion, which is still a lot of money. But the provinces too are giving people money through a whole range of different programs. About 5% of the population is currently receiving income assistance, social assistance from the provinces. That money is no longer required if people are receiving a basic income. So some of the money from provincial income assistance can be used to fund the program. And if you take all of those things into account, suddenly the cost of a basic income is coming in at about the same cost as a lot of other programs we've decided that we can afford as Canadians. Things like the $10 a day daycare program and the pharmacare program and the dental care program. It's also the case that the cost of a basic income depends very much on how you design it. And the parliamentary budget officer looked solely at the program that was offered in Ontario. If you make a very minor change that has almost no effect at all on a basic income's effect on the poverty rate, in the way that adult children who live with their parents are treated, the cost of the program falls by 40%. So we can get the cost of a basic income program down to a very, very low level, and then talk about how progressive income taxes can cover those costs. So we spent a little bit of time talking about that, but the parliamentary budget officer spent even more time making exactly the same case. And I think he has a little more credibility than basic income advocates. We also spent time talking about other things. I focused a lot on the difficulty that recipients have, the bureaucracy that governs the current system. The cost and ineffectiveness of current programs is really quite profound. A lot of people don't receive the benefits that they should be receiving in the current system simply because it's so hard to apply for those programs. Every one of those programs has different application methods, different eligibility requirements. And if you really want to spend some time driving yourself a little bit crazy, you should volunteer for a community consulting organization and try completing tax returns for people with low incomes. It's an incredibly difficult proposition. And we're asking people to do that at the worst times in their lives. I mean, something terrible has happened to them. That's why they have no money. They've lost a job, somebody's died, something terrible has happened. Go out, find a computer and figure out what you're entitled to receive. So that's what we talked about.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Jay-Z, I'm going to move to you now. A number of us saw a few months back, there was really some groundbreaking research done by UBC with the Foundations for Social Change, in which a group of 50 people who were experiencing homelessness in Vancouver were provided with income supports. Can you tell us a little bit about that project, what it entailed, and maybe some of the surprising outcomes you observed?
Sure. So we gave 50 individuals experiencing homelessness a one-time unconditional cash transfer of $7,500 with another group of 65 individuals as a control group. And after we gave the cash to these individuals, we followed them for a year. So what we found was this cash transfer reduced homelessness by 99 days in a year. That's over 3 months. It increased participants' savings and spending on food, rent, clothing, transit, and we did not see increased spending on alcohol and drugs. So that's a common myth that people will misspend the money. We did not see that at all. Importantly, people became more self-sufficient over 1 year. They used less social and health and justice services over 1 year. That led to net savings for society overall. We actually found 110% return of investment from this cash transfer. So each cash transfer generated net savings of over $700 per person per year. So what this suggests is that this cash transfer, even though it may seem, costly upfront, but that can actually generate long-term savings and a lot of savings over time that will end up saving government, saving taxpayers money in the long run. Now, speaking to another myth, which is work or employment. So the myth is when people give up work, getting the cash transfer. But we actually, we did not see a reduction in employment after the cash transfer. So that was no work wasn't affected negatively. But for those who already have a job, which is more than 30% of our participants, we actually saw a 77% increase in work hours and a 50% in pay after getting the cash transfer. And this is because they're able to get a better paying job, or some of them up-trained themselves and got a different job instead. Some people put their children to daycare and school so they can spend more time working. So those are kind of the surprising results we found. And I think these results are consistent with most cash transfer studies in the past. And it's not what we commonly assume basic income consequences will be.
Yeah.
I'm putting the study in the chats for anybody who wants to read the study.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jay-Z. And yeah, absolutely. Our experience in Ontario as well with the Ontario Basic Income Pilot showed many of the same outcomes. And again, some surprising results. Smoking went down, incidents of drinking went down, and people were working more, going back for training and trying to get better jobs. So certainly it's interesting to follow the progression of many of these experiments and pilots across the board. I'm going to move to you now, Tracy. Can you talk to us a little bit about how civil society organizations and the basic income movement are coming together? I know there's been meetings of basic income groups, experts, and allies coming together in the development of a consensus statement, and then there was a agreement to really bring together a Canadian focused event on basic income. Can you talk about some of those discussions that you've had?
Absolutely. The basic income movement is really starting to gain momentum in Canada. So it's been a very exciting time. We've seen about 100 organizations, people from different sectors, groups across the country meet on a regular quarterly basis. So we've got people that have living experience with poverty. We have Indigenous leaders, academic researchers come together to really provide updates on what groups and organizations have been doing on the basic income front, and decide on strategic actions that we could collectively consider to advance a basic income in Canada. From these conversations, it seemed like there was, at least in society or from policymakers, this sense that there was a lack of coherence or conflicting views about the kind of basic income that we want to see in Canada. Especially since, as Sheila mentioned, all the different models that are out there, some suggesting more of a demogrant model, others wanting to see an income-tested supplement version. So there was really a sense that we needed to come to consensus about the basic income that we would be advocating for as a movement. And so Dr. Sid Frankel from the University of Manitoba chaired those series of sessions. Basically took us about a year and a half to come up with the consensus statement that defines the core principles and the elements of basic income that we'd like to see. As you can imagine, trying to build consensus across all the different organizations and people was challenging. So it took a lot of discussion, a lot of negotiation, but we did it. You can now easily find the Canadian consensus statement that emerged from these discussions. I was able to just Google it and find it, but you can certainly find it on the BICN website, UEI Works, Coalition Canada. A lot of our partners have it listed on their websites. So it's really important then for you, for individuals, groups, organizations that you know and you work with, to review the consensus statement and to endorse it, include it on your organizational website or share it on social media if this is something that you can rally behind and support. In this way, we're hoping to present a unified movement, a common vision across the country for the basic income we'd like to see. So speaking about the Basic Income Forum then, the sheer urgency of the times that we're living in right now really has prompted a lot of discussions about not just talking about basic income, but actually seeing movement and action on this front. So a lot of our conversations over the past year have been about what can we do to provide more action-oriented events to equip basic income supporters with the skills and the resources for political advocacy, for community organizing, and for movement building. So as opposed to some of the traditional NABIG conferences, there's the North American Basic Income conferences that were, I'd say, fairly academic in their approach. We wanted to see a pan-Canadian event that was really focused on strategies, skills, and tools for advancing the movement. So working with our basic income national partners, we put in a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grant to organize and facilitate the Basic Income Guarantee Forum, the big forum in Ottawa this spring. And I believe Sheila is going to tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Tracy. That's great. So just some of the specific details, Tracy, when is it happening? Where is it happening?
I'm going to put the poster into the chat.
Okay.
It's happening May in Ottawa, the nation's capital. University of Ottawa is going to be hosting. I'm going to put the poster in right now so people can access that. I believe that we have until the rest of the week, or January the 24th, I believe, is the end. Is that right? Or 22nd? For calls for proposals. So if you're interested in getting in a proposal, please do so this week. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Tracy. And Sheila, maybe that's a good segue to ask you about why Forum 2024 is so critical. You know, what's going to be on, Tracy talked to us a little bit about what's on the agenda, but can you maybe give us a sneak peek around who some of the guests are going to be, who's been invited to participate, what we can expect?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Tracy. I'm going to begin by echoing what Tracy said about why this is so timely and why we really need this now. And it is the urgency. People are struggling, and for too many, it's severe and it's getting quite desperate. We hear talk lately about a polycrisis. So we have a crisis in mental health, in climate change, threats to democracy, affordability across the board. You know, so definitions of who's poor and who's middle class don't mean much of anything anymore. There's so much out there. Income insecurity feeds all of those crises. Income security gives people the ability to actually be part of the solutions. So it connects to so many things, the work that we're doing on basic income. As Tracy mentioned, we've got lots of allies now, many organizations whose main job is something else, food security, housing, whatever. They're increasingly putting forward positions on basic income or recommendations for something approaching a basic income. We need to keep really building those allies and build common ground around, you know, the goals that we share. Next reason is that a federal election is coming. We really want to see basic income where it belongs on party platforms and in public debate everywhere as much as we can. Some provinces and territories have been leading the way, but they can't do it alone. No jurisdiction can. We really need the feds. And in particular, there's a real strain on municipalities. And I'm just like, it's hard to listen and watch the chat when I see lots of people representing municipalities and involved in different roles. And hi to so many of you I haven't seen in ages. I wish I could see you. But there's a strain on municipalities. And the thing about a national basic income is that it really offers a way to reconfigure income security in a way that citizens, residents, and taxpayers basically are going to get better value for their money. We're all the same taxpayers. We all live in the same country, no matter where we actually live. So now on to the speakers, and I'm glad that we've now got you need to go to the forum link and check everybody out because they're just amazing. And I wish I could mention them all. All of us on this call are part of, all of the panelists here are part, so you already know some of us. Some other feature speakers, like they show the range that we're looking at and they show the need for knowledge, networking, and action. So I'm just going to go through a few quickly. Dr. Danielle Martin. So she's a practicing physician and author. Her primary concern is about the healthcare system, and basic income matters to that. Jessica Topfer is a student and former Ontario pilot participant. Josephine Gray is a community organizer extraordinaire. There's not much she doesn't do. Rabia Ketter was the force, a serious force behind the new disability benefit. So she brings a lot to us as well. Jim Stanford, many people know, is an influential labor economist. He's focused on the future of work. Less known maybe, but fascinating to me because I'm fortunate to be able to read enough French that I could read his book, is Yves-Marie Abraham. His book is a powerful book about the environment and justice. He and Jim Stanford might not see eye to eye on some of these issues around work and that, so it will be fascinating. There are no long speeches and lectures. We have formats where all the panelists are in conversation with each other, and there's lots of opportunity to engage people at different parts of the forum. There are sessions on Indigenous perspectives, municipal matters, care, well-being, and social inclusion. The whole care phenomenon in our society is hugely important. The UN's Sustainable Development Goals, so many of them linking to the work that we're doing. And then, as Tracy mentioned, networking and movement building and the skills building that we need to move forward. And then the other sessions don't know what they are yet, but the proposals are coming in. Every day there's several more coming in. So we're really excited about that. Some are artistic expressions, and that's really cool. So yeah, just in closing, like it is in person and it's virtual. It's not a place where you're just going to sit in a chair. We really want it to be participatory. We want everybody brings some form of experience and knowledge that's valuable to share. And so we hope that we can provide a place for that to happen. Thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sheila. And we have 325 participants today on the call, so we're hoping you'll all come. And it'll be a very exciting and energizing time, I think, in May. I'm going to move back to you, Jessie. I wanted to follow up with some of your earlier comments about being on the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. And you were part of a pretty unique initiative called A Human Picture. And it was a little short film that kind of focused around your story. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's all about?
Sure. So shortly after the pilot cancellation happened, an individual named Luke Mastruzzi reached out to me from a company called Powerline Films with the intent of making a documentary about the what happened with the Ontario Basic Income Pilot, the cancellation, and then my work when I started taking photos and producing my Humans of Basic Income portrait series. So it's a short film. It's about 15 to 20 minutes long, and it follows the lives of myself as well as a couple of other basic income recipients and what they were using basic income for, and also what was the aftermath like with the cancellation. So it's a really nice, really great movie that does sort of follow these stories, and the stories are people from Hamilton, Thunder Bay, Lindsay, and sort of talks about like what the impacts were and how these people, like the actual participants, were actually affected. And I think like there's power in this, and one of the biggest things I sort of learned and realized when I did my portrait series, because if I'm being completely honest, my portrait series, I joke that, but I'm not joking, it was born out of rage. I was very angry when the government canceled the pilot prematurely, and I wanted them to know who they were affecting and put a human face to it. And I didn't realize that the impact of putting a human face to this issue does sort of make it different from then just like numbers and statistics, but it is actually people that are being affected. It's a really great little movie, and it's been screened in film festivals all over and is continuing to be screened. In fact, this Friday, I'm going to be going to Peterborough to attend a film festival there to watch the screening of it as well. So it's you can watch it, and you can be able to schedule a screening with it. The website is just like ahumanpicture.com, and you could be able to just contact the filmmakers to get that screened in wherever you are.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jessie. And I certainly recommend it as well, having seen it multiple times.
Same here.
Evelyn, I want to get back to something that was raised both in your comments as well as a question that popped up in the chat, and that's really around that National Post article this morning. But more generally, do you think we are further or closer or further apart from implementing a basic income in Canada? We've seen a number of different policy developments around during and following the pandemic, and certainly there's been an increase in political discourse. But do you think we're closer now than we were a couple of years ago?
That's a really, really good question, and my answer to it probably depends on what I feel like when I answer it. I think without any question, I think we're at a really pivotal point in history. We're at a really pivotal time as a society. I think on the one hand, it was really predictable. We knew as we were going through the pandemic and the government was spending a lot of money on supports and borrowing a lot of money, that when this ended, there'd be a new focus on government debt, on the deficit, on affordability, on interest rates, and so on. And that certainly happened. And to some extent, basic income, I think, has been a bit of a victim of that. People are worried that it's going to cost, that people are worried about the resources involved. But on the other hand, I don't think any of us can spend any time in any city in Canada today without recognizing the social costs of poverty. We're medicating poverty. People are going to our emergency departments, but not for medical reasons, but essentially because they're poor. We're paying the consequences of the lives that people are living. We're policing poverty. We're treating it in our prisons and in our jails. And it's pretty clear that the programs we have in place don't seem to be working very well. Yet somehow in the depths of the pandemic, we found the resources to house the unhoused. We found the resources to provide money to people without income. And those programs, as flawed as they were actually very, very effective. The poverty rate in 2015 was 14.5%. In 2021, as the CERB and all the other benefits came into play, it was as low as 6.4%. And as those programs wound down, it's going back up again. We're seeing the poverty rate rise once again. And so I think it's something we do need to deal with. And I think there have been some initiatives that build on these insights. The federal government for a very long time has been working on a disability benefit that it keeps describing as a sort of a basic income. It'll certainly have some of the features of the basic income. And a lot of provinces have redesigned their disability benefits along the lines of a basic income. Quebec has a basic income program, a sort of a basic income program for people with disabilities. Sorry. Newfoundland's just announced a basic income for people between 60 and 65. PEI is running a basic income pilot. A lot of provinces and many cities are on record asking the federal government to consider a basic income. PEI just recently developed a plan for a basic income to be jointly administered, jointly run, jointly funded by the federal government and the province for working age adults. So there are a lot of initiatives underway. So when I answer that, I think there are challenges out there, but there's still a lot of room for hope and a lot of room for hard work as we move this forward. I think this is the time to be even more committed than ever before.
Great. Thanks for that. And certainly inspiring, and just reminded as well that Sarah just posted that the Northwest Territories will be rolling out a disability and senior program similar to basic income as well. So a number of jurisdictions are certainly on top of this. Before we go into some more general questions, I just wanted to put an open-ended question out to our panel, and maybe specifically Sheila and Evelyn. But anybody can feel free to answer this. Late last year, we lost former Senator Hugh Segal. So for those who may not be familiar with Hugh, but I think probably most of us are, as well as being an author and an academic and a political animal, Hugh was, of course, perhaps this country's biggest basic income proponent, and the author of a book recently about basic income too, Bootstraps Need Boots. What legacy do you think Hugh has left behind for the rest of us to carry on? Can I put that out for some of us to answer? Sheila or Evelyn, maybe to start? Yeah, Sheila.
I'll start maybe, because like his loss is just devastating. Our BICN's origin story sort of starts with Hugh. There was a group of people on the Hill, Hugh in the Senate and Art Eggleton at the time, different MPs, including Mike Savage, who's now the mayor of Hamilton. Rob Rayner, who's out there in the, the universe somewhere, was part of this group that, you know, just really understood that we in Canada had a lot going for us. And Hugh was one of the drivers of that, who was like such a lone voice for such a long time. So it was so rewarding that we got during his time to be able to really, really build this movement. But there's not a lot of support on the conservative benches now. I mean, there are amazing people in the Senate who are, you know, picking up that championing role. There are MPs and whatever, but that, I don't know how to describe it, that, you know, caring conservative, understanding, you know, the things that real people are going through and looking at real solutions. We really, really miss that. And the best that we can do is just carry on and just keep pushing until we get this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sheila. Any other thoughts from our panel?
I think Hugh was a very good friend, and I certainly miss his mentorship a lot. But I think the thing that comes to mind whenever I think about him is that he was so much like the Energizer Bunny. No matter what happens, he didn't stop. I mean, no matter what barriers emerged, what terrible criticisms of basic income emerged, whatever happened out there, he was relentless, and he just continued with that point forever. And I think that's something I certainly take to heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great chapter in Jamie Swift and Elaine Power's book about Evelyn and Hugh coming together to sort of launch the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. So that's a Case for Basic Income if you're interested in reading a little bit more about some of that history. But before we wrap up, there's a couple of questions I'd like to get to that I've seen posted in the chat. One was from Renee, and Sheila, I think you referenced the role of municipalities, but I'm wondering if we could dig a little bit deeper into that. And I'll pose the questions: what have municipalities been doing in this space, and what can they be doing to advocate and to push senior levels of government for a basic income? Can I throw that out there to the group? Any thoughts? Sheila?
Just really quickly, I think there are brilliant examples across the country of different things that municipalities are doing. Some have been inspired by direct action from people, across our sort of basic income movement. Some seem to have just happened because they're logical and rational. And what municipalities can do in Canada is different than they can do in the States. It's remarkable to look at what's happening at a municipal level in the States, but they have powers that ours don't. But what they can do is really help explain their situation to more senior levels of government and really help them understand how important it is for all levels of government that we really figure out how to do income security better. I mean, the news is just filled with stories of municipalities facing environmental damage that they have no capacity to respond to. And if all of their resources go into dealing with fires or floods, then they have little left in a municipal budget to run services that so many people without a lot of income depend on. So that municipal aspect is huge. And municipalities are increasingly going directly to the federal government. I hope they continue.
Yep. Thanks, Sheila. Any other thoughts on the role of municipalities? I'm going to take a question from Mary, and it's some of what Evelyn has already talked about, I think, but maybe I'll ask some of the other panelists to weigh in as well. So Mary asked, what would you talk about your thoughts on strategic responses to the possibility of a conservative government in the next couple of years? And so certainly, there is the possibility that the current federal government, which hasn't necessarily pushed the concept of basic income forward, may be defeated at the polls next time around. What is the prospect of either conservative or another party coming in and maybe being a little bit more enthusiastic or less enthusiastic about basic income? Any thoughts on that, JZ or Tracy or Jessie? Tracy?
Yeah. I think on the cost argument, income inequality and poverty costs us enormously, right? It's very expensive to keep up paying for the symptoms of poverty without addressing the actual root causes. I think really, as a movement, we need to start really pointing out to whatever government is in power the expenses that we are attributing to or trying to deal or contend with these symptoms. I think there's some low-hanging fruit. I mean, I'm thinking about the Canadians for Tax Fairness just released a report 4 days ago saying that that Canada provides about $50 billion in oil and gas subsidies, right? And in a time of climate change, we should not be subsidizing the oil and gas sector. We know that the vast majority of the tax expenditures go to the top 10%. The government itself in budget 2023 indicated that through the use of significant, and I'm quoting here, through the use of significant deductions, credits, and other tax preferences, some of the wealthiest Canadians pay little to no personal income tax. The government is aware of that. And so we need to be addressing the tax system, not only because it increases income inequality, which is bad for everybody, but it denies the public purse from having the necessary funds to provide a robust social safety net. And that's not only for people living in poverty. Those benefits are felt across the income distribution, including people that are the wealthiest. They benefit when we have a social safety net in place. So those health benefits are really for across society. So I think we really need to demonstrate and to really talk about whether it's conservative or not, that as a society, we all benefit when we address these issues. Great.
Thanks, Tracy. Any other thoughts from our panel on that question?
Yeah, the cost of poverty, it costs Canadian taxpayers $72 billion to $84 billion per year, and 1 in 7 people in Canada live in poverty. So, like, thinking about that cost and how much it affects us, I like to think that that's a nonpartisan issue, and that's something that any of us should be concerned about, regardless of what political party you align yourself with, and how much better we could be as a society if we aren't paying those costs, when so much of that cost is absolutely preventable. Like points that people were bringing up about the cost of healthcare, or even the cost of the justice system, that like these things would not happen if people weren't living in poverty. Like, it's very preventable. It's a very seems to me to be an obvious solution. So why not give this a try?
And that, I think, is a terrific way to end this webinar. Thank you all so much. Tracy, Sheila, JZ, Jessie, Evelyn, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting. And again, a reminder to everybody that we'll be doing this again in person in May in Ottawa. So please check out Forum 2024, and we hope to see you there. And I'll turn it back to you, Maureen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for bringing this topic alive for us. Thank you so much to our panelists. There's so much exciting developments in basic income coming our way. Tamarack looks forward to following these advancements in 2024. And we wish the organizers well as they continue planning for the Basic Income Guarantee Forum in May. As mentioned, this is a first of its kind gathering focused on how Canada can do better and the roles that governments and civil society can play in making it happen. There was a few questions I saw in the chat and wondering about when to register, how to register. I believe Orpus shared that link in the chat, and everything should be, you can find those answers when you visit the chat or the link. Your opinion matters to us. We'd love to hear your feedback on the webinar today. So we invite you to tell us what you thought of this webinar by answering a few short questions. So the link for the survey will also be posted in the chat. And I'll remind everyone, I saw a few questions coming in about this as well. In a few days, you will receive our follow-up email. That will include the recording from today's call, as well as the links, the PowerPoint slide, and some high-level notes that we were taking. And finally, if you enjoyed this webinar, you might be interested in some upcoming learning events, including workshops and webinars like this one. So I think it's on the slide there, or you can visit our website for a full lineup at www.tamarackcommunity.ca. There we go. Upcoming learning opportunities. So using social finance to catalyze place-based change. That's coming up on January 23rd at 12 o'clock Eastern time. And we have another one on January 30th, which is Indigenous Partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's at 1 o'clock Eastern time. So many great questions that came in the question and answer box. We'll consolidate those questions. I'll send those to Tom, and if there's some quick answers we can provide, we will. And you're welcome to put questions into the survey as well. So I want to thank you all again for joining us, participants, panelists, Tom for moderating, and yeah, take care, folks. Thanks again.